Just 2 months after their induction, the newbies face their first intense shooting training, which reveals their improved combat strengths. In an overheated bathroom conversation, the boys unearth Kafka's shocking secret. Amid these revelations, an urgent alarm signals their first real test. In this video, the newbies will engage in their debut battle as official defense troop members, and we will also see just how strong the commander and vice commander really are. Let's get started. In the next scene, the defense force arrives at the outbreak site in Sagamihara, where the estimated size of their target is 150 meters in length, categorizing it as a large type. The monster is also moving northward at a very slow pace, and currently, the self-defense force is evacuating people from the area and transporting supplies. Inside one of the cargo trucks, Hashina asks his fellow defense force troops if they are ready, declaring it's time to slay monsters. While Kafka and Kikaru exchange glances, we revisit a moment in time when Kafka had told Kikaru about his transformation into a monster, which surprised her. Kikaru was incredulous, belittling the poor by saying they really eat anything, which made Kafka shout that he didn't want it to happen, irritating Reno with their loudness. Kafka mentioned he thought disclosing this to the defense force might be an option because they might heal him, a notion Kikaru disagreed with. She explained that even if they didn't kill him, he would face endless inspections and experimentation, potentially ending his path as a defense force troop member. She further mentioned that strong monsters given code names are supposedly used as parts for special weapons, suggesting a worst-case scenario where Kafka might also be used in such a manner, which scared Kafka and Reno. Kafka, frightened, cried and asked Kikaru to keep their secret, thinking of it as saving an old man, which shocked Kikaru due to Kafka's closeness. Kikaru agreed because Kafka had saved her, but warned if she found out he was a monster harming people, she herself would kill Kafka. Reno was chilled by what he heard, while Kafka, smiling, accepted this and expected Kikaru to do so. After this, we return to the present, where Kikaru hopes Kafka won't disappoint her. While looking at Kafka, he suddenly appeared nauseous, puzzling her. She exclaimed that Kafka looked about to throw up, to which Kafka apologized, saying he was nervous and ate too much, and Kikaru was irritated because normally, you can't eat if you're nervous. Soon, our troops arrive at the Defense Force 3 or 4 temporary base, at the Leon Mall Sagamihara store parking area. Upon seeing the monster, Kafka and Reno couldn't believe its size, appearing to be a mix between a mushroom and a crab. As the Hashina platoon prepares, Hashina tells his personnel he will announce the operation that day. He informs them that after originating from the Kanawa Fault, the target began moving while growing underground. They believe the target emerged above ground because it reached its proliferation phase. Mina was leading a squadron to deal with the base monster, but the issue was the innumerable after-beasts being produced. We are shown Haruchi and Aoi, who are part of the Nakanashima platoon, and Hashina shows them the subjugation zones in the area. It was a district without important facilities or main transportation networks for subjugation. Their job was to deal with the after-beasts while preventing them from leaving the zone, he pointed out. This was important because the outcome would significantly affect the situation. He noted that, of course, platoons with newbies were placed at the end, meaning they were the last line of defense. Hashina asked if there were any questions, and no one responded, indicating they were ready. He stated that no matter how well they performed during training, it wouldn't save a life, so they needed to show their strength on the battlefield, calling them fledglings. This hyped up the troops, and they soon shouted with all their might, after which Hashina wished them good luck. Reno told Kafka it was time, to which Kafka agreed. Kafka thought again about what might happen to him if he didn't improve, stating that if he didn't perform well, he wouldn't have another chance. As Kikaru looked at him, he mentioned feeling a lot of pressure but was somehow very excited. Reno was surprised and smiled, realizing, of course, this was the job Kafka had long wanted, and told him to make their first mission a success. They were then informed that they were at Point E, where the invasion of After Beasts was confirmed, and they were sent to the area to subjugate the monsters. Kafka put on his gas mask and urged Kikoru to charge. Our troops charged forward as Kikoru wondered why Kafka was ordering him around. Kafka reminded Reno not to die, which Reno echoed back to him. Kikoru informed Kafka that the monster was approaching, and as the giant mushroom creature emerged, Kafka and his team prepared to take it down. The debut battle of the Rookie Defense Force troops began, supervised by Hashina. He told them to impress their seniors from the start. Back in District E, Kafka realized the battle had started, but he felt different compared to the exam, feeling calm now. He felt his suit responding to him. He released his force due to excitement, but despite this, a kaiju bumped into him, throwing him off. Kikoru scolded him for being too forward when he could only release 1%, advising him to stay back. A senior team member expressed annoyance at having to babysit the newbies, wishing they would just observe from a distance without getting in the way. Kikoru was irritated, feeling underestimated. Their senior advised them that they didn't yet know where the enemy's vitals were, so they should be cautious until they had information from the frontline group. Kikoru then shot the monster, surprising the senior, who agreed while advising to carefully aim at the kaiju's potential vital areas. Kikoru fired at the monster in front of them, stunning the senior, who couldn't believe how strong a newcomer to the defense force was. Realizing Kikoru's strength, Kafka called out to him, praising him, which secretly thrilled Kikoru, who said it was obvious because it was her, as she is always great. Suddenly, his bodysuit announced that his vitals were becoming abnormal, and his heart rate was increasing, embarrassing Kikoru, who said it didn't need to announce such things. In District F, they too were attacked by kaiju, and their senior instructed that a finishing blow was needed on one of them. Ihara showed off his skills by shooting the monster, causing it to fall. He was praised by their senior, so when he was about to brag to Reno, he turned to find Reno had single-handedly defeated a kaiju, surprising him. Reno had beaten the same type of kaiju they and the seniors had struggled with, which was unbelievable. Reno revealed a vial, explaining he had changed his bullet's trait from explosive to freezing, which seemed effective, allowing them to fight while slowing down the enemy's movement. He felt that with more practice, he could hunt them more effectively. Ihara was chilled by Reno's confidence, while Reno thought it wasn't enough, and he needed to be stronger so that Kafka wouldn't need to transform. Moving on to District J, the seniors there couldn't believe what they were witnessing. It turns out Haruchi and Aoi were the ones impressing everyone, leading a senior to ask their platoon leader, Nakanashima, what was with the newbies this year, as he was losing confidence due to their skill and strength. Nakanashima replied that he had heard they had a good harvest this year, but didn't expect it to be this impressive. Aoi and Haruchi bragged at each other again, with Aoi telling him he had already taken down 3 kaiju, implying Haruchi was slow, to which Haruchi responded that he helped him kill 2 of them. Nakanashima then commented, seemingly thrilled about the new recruits, mentioning they had a wild type and an elegant type, which surprised a colleague who realized he was referring to their appearances earlier. Charmed by Aoi and Haruchi's rivalry, he even considered making them official members of his platoon, which alarmed them. Joking aside, Nakanashima heard from Hashina that a few stood out, but it turns out it wasn't just a few. Compared to previous years, the released force of the newbies was high, likely due to the top newbies motivating the others to push harder. Back in District E, while Kafka remained behind the sandbags, he was amazed that his fellow newbies had already killed many kaiju. This made him think it wasn't good as, compared to them, he felt like a burden. He wondered what he could do and remembered a senior's comment about not knowing the enemy's vitals, sparking an idea. Staring at a downed kaiju, Kafka regained his composure and decided to use his own weapon to fight. His senior was shocked by his actions, as Kafka began to dissect the kaiju beside them. Kafka thought to himself how helpful the suit was, even with only 1% released force, and pondered if it could be mass-produced for the disposal industry. While dissecting, Kafka noticed the Kaiju's body resembled a fungus-type monster, but its core wasn't in the usual location. Upon finding something significant, he quickly called Hashina to report the core's location. He explained that it's located at the base of their neck, but because it's underneath hard fiber muscles acting as a spine, troop members with low offensive abilities need to attack it from the side for penetration. Hashina understood, and Kafka added something very important. The after beasts also have proliferative organs, which are the white, bulgy organs near their buttocks. If these aren't destroyed, new after beasts will emerge from the corpse of the dead after beast. Hashina called him, praising Kafka's good work. It turns out the doctor's name is Onii-Chan, who was ordered by Hashina to pass on the information Kafka discovered to all troop members. Hashina commented that Kafka's experience from his previous job must have contributed to his discovery, but it was his studying that really paid off. When praised by Hashina, Kafka felt happy and thought he had managed to be useful to the defense force. Kafka informed Hashina that he would take care of finishing off any corpses whose cores hadn't been destroyed, thinking he would do everything he could to reach Mina and stand by her side. Suddenly, he heard a loud explosion behind him and asked what it was. Hashina said it looked like they had started, and Kafka should watch carefully. We then see Mina holding a giant cannon, positioned to attack. Using her extraordinary strength, she managed to use the large cannon to blast the core of the giant mushroom/crab kaiju. Hashina told Kafka that this was the power of the person he aims to stand beside, leaving Kafka in awe of what he saw. After Mina's attack struck, Onii-Chan informed her that the guidance of the base monster to the target location was complete, and they would now begin concentrated firing on its 4 limbs. Mina then stated that she had finished loading her 3rd bullet, which her interlocutor understood, and started the calculations for her to attack again. She suddenly remembered a conversation she had with Kafka about who would become a troop member first. She saw Kafka watching her, and although he couldn't hear her, she told him that this was her now. She used her released force, which impressively reached 96%. She fired to hit the giant kaiju again, and the shot was so powerful that it created a massive shockwave. The force reached Kikaru and Kafka, and upon hitting the monster, it made a large hole in the kaiju's body. Kafka was astounded, while Reno and Kikaru couldn't believe Mina's strength. The info room reported to Mina that the life response of the base monster was gone and it was falling. The 4th bullet had finished loading, and she was prepared to fire again. She shot the monster again, and was informed that the base monster had been defeated and obliterated. However, Mina was still loading the 5th bullet, which puzzled those in the info room because the monster had already been defeated. Mina replied that it was an order, so her interlocutor had no choice but to comply. After she fired, Kafka clearly saw the solid impact on the monster. Kafka commented on how different it was to see Mina's strength on TV or through binoculars compared to witnessing it in person. He was awestruck by Mina's true power. Hashina approached him and asked if this made him feel like giving up, which Kafka found odd. Hashina explained that if he wanted to stand beside Mina, it meant he needed to have a strength level comparable to what he saw today. Annoyed, Kafka asked Hashina if he could demonstrate that level of strength, to which Hashina just scratched his head and said it was impossible, further irritating Kafka. As a kaiju charged at them from behind, Hashina explained that his released force was too low for shooting weapons, so he couldn't match Mina's strength against large opponents. The kaiju charging at them was suddenly sliced through, and Hashina noted that he might have the upper hand when facing small to medium-sized enemies. Kafka noticed Hashina used katanas, but his movements were so fast that Kafka didn't see any movement occur. Hashina explained that his family lineage was a clan of monster subjugators dating back to the Muromachi period. Hashina showed his preferred weapon, stating he was better with it than with guns. Kafka commented that the class of their commander and vice commander was the strongest force in a troop, and they even had personalized equipment tailored to their individual needs. Mina informed Hashina that she had dealt with the base monster, prompting Hashina to tell Kafka that their conversation was over and the main event was about to start. Kafka was puzzled because Mina had said the base monster was defeated. So Hashina reiterated that the real problem was the countless number of after beasts that could spawn from it. Even if they brought down the base monster, the after beast left in its corpse would start charging at them afterward. Numerous after beasts charged at them, leading Hashina to inform the others that it was time for the final battle, and once they finished off these creatures, they could go home for a delicious breakfast. Haruchi grinned at this and commented that Hashina made it sound so easy. Suddenly, a senior among them shouted, teasing the rookies that they looked tired and might need more stamina training, urging the other seniors to show that it wasn't just released force that was needed in battle. Nakanashima approached Haruchi and Aoi, teasingly saying it was okay to leave the fighting to the seniors and rest, asking what the two of them would do. The two understood his meaning and replied that, of course, they would also help. Okanaji commented that the newbies seemed very tired, and for their first mission, the subjugation was quite challenging. Nevertheless, if they managed to overcome it, it might be possible for them to evolve. Hashina said that most troop members released force stops somewhere between 20 to 30%, which typically marks the end of their careers as just regular troop members. However, he noted that many talented individuals managed to overcome this barrier and develop into commander class. Of all the newbies that year, currently, only Kikaru had surpassed that wall, but he felt that there was another, and he sensed it in Reno. While resting against the wall, Iharu reflected on how he had worked hard and trained at Subjugation High School for several years, wondering why he couldn't keep up with Reno. An announcement then informed them that the After Beasts were heading towards District B, prompting Reno to suggest they return to the front line. As they talked, they noticed a man in a Monster Sweeper Incorporated uniform. He was commenting that the proliferative organ he had placed inside had been damaged, and he was puzzled about how the troops knew about it, leading him to wonder if there was a well-informed member about monsters among them. Reno was taken aback by this, and when the man turned around, he asked Reno if he knew anything about it, appearing to be the undercover human-like kaiju that was part of the disposal crew. Reno couldn't understand why there was a disposal crew member in that location. While that was happening, it turns out that Toku and other former co-workers of Kafka were watching from a distance, and one of them commented on the size of the Hanju they were battling, asking if Reno was also there, while another complained about not enjoying the view without binoculars. This explained why all the cleaners in the Tokyo Kanagawa area had been summoned due to the intense battle taking place. Suddenly, their officer asked them if they had seen the newbie, to which Toku was surprised and mentioned that he was probably hanging out in the restroom again. We returned to Reno and the newbie referred to by Toku, who was an undercover human-like kaiju, feeling somewhat disappointed because he had planned to outsmart the Defense Force troops using a Yoju variant capable of splitting off from itself, and he contemplated whether to revive them again as it was exhausting to do so. Reno wondered what he was talking about and felt something was off about the man. The man stood up, looked at him, and as Iharu was about to warn the man that the area was dangerous and to stand by, the man pointed. Iharu stared in confusion, but when the man's finger changed shape, Reno was shocked and tried to warn Iharu of an attack. However, it was too late, and the man's strange attack hit Iharu above the chest, causing a hole there. The man commented that he hadn't hit the heart, and his accuracy really dropped when he was in that form. Iharu screamed in extreme pain, and his blood started to flow. He couldn't stop the bleeding from his wound, but Reno calmed him and suggested using the function of their suits to bind the wound. Iharu was bewildered about what was happening and who that man was. Reno realized that the man was a kaiju, and remembering that there was another humanoid kaiju besides Kafka, he recalled another. The undercover humanoid transformed in front of them, soon revealing his true form, which shocked Iharu, and Reno remembered that this was the same kaiju that appeared in the exam. Iharu asked if this was the one who had taken down Kikaru, to which Reno agreed. The kaiju scratched its head and said it didn't want to leave empty-handed, so it asked if it had managed to capture an officer as a living sample. Iharu and Reno shuddered with fear, and Reno immediately tried to inform a platoon leader, Ikaruga, about their situation and requested backup, but his radio seemed to be malfunctioning. It turned out that the Kaiju was responsible for this, explaining that it had handled their radio communication and that the section they were in was now within an undetectable pocket of space. As it prepared to attack again, it added that as a trick to hide itself in the human world, it seemed to be working well for hunting them. Reno noticed the incoming attack and tried to dodge, but it still hit him on the side. Iharu was worried about him, and the Kaiju attacked again, this time solidly hitting Reno's thigh. Reno couldn't describe the pain he was feeling, while the Kaiju noted that it was somewhat off its mark at that time. Enduring the pain, Reno thought it was severe, and the Kaiju managed to break through the shield of his suit as if it were nothing. Suddenly, the Kaiju noticed something and asked Reno if he could see its attack, which also surprised Iharu. We returned to a point in time where Reno and Kikaru were talking, and Kikaru informed him so that if he ever encountered the human-like Kaiju again, he would have an idea. Kikaru explained that at first, he thought the monster was using magic, but if one observes carefully, its fingertips have a certain tell before it attacks. Reno carefully observed the monster's fingers and noticed something, so he thought he needed to focus on that, and if he could grasp the timing of its attack, he would be able to dodge it. Soon enough, Reno managed to evade the monster's attack, impressing Iharu, also making the Kaiju remark that it was just as it had expected. Suddenly, Reno shot at the Kaiju, but it easily deflected the bullet, and he quickly told Iharu to retreat and call for reinforcements. Iharu was irritated and questioned why he should be the one to be saved, so he didn't notice the Kaiju's attack, but fortunately, Reno saved him. However, the attack still grazed Iharu's shoulder. Iharu couldn't describe how painful it was, and Reno urged him to leave, which surprised Iharu. Reno thought there was nothing more frightening than their situation. This was the creature that had beaten Kikaru, so he knew he was no match for it. Soon after, Iharu decided to leave, and as Reno reflected on how Kafka had tried to save him, he thought about the kind of officer he wanted to be, one who would risk their life to protect others like him in such times. Even if he couldn't defeat the monster, at least he could buy time for Iharu to escape. With that resolve, he bravely tried again to shoot the Kaiju, but the monster easily dodged it and countered. Reno managed to dodge the attacks while also returning fire. As he fled, Iharu thought that this was not the Reno he knew before, and he couldn't believe that Reno was able to contend with such a terrifying monster. He almost got hit by the Kaiju's attack, and his fear was evident on his face. Let's return to a point in time when Hashina was explaining that there is a wall that troops hit in their unleashed combat power, which typically ranges around 20 to 30%. He mentioned that this is a wall that few manage to surpass, which made Iharu reflective. He was somewhat bothered because it had been almost 2 weeks, yet he still hadn't reached 20% unleashed combat power. He explained that since the day Mina saved him, he had dedicated his life to becoming stronger, but despite all his efforts, Reno seemed to effortlessly surpass him, which irritated him. Returning to the present, the Kaiju suddenly moved quickly to Reno's side. The monster commented that it seemed like Reno was acting as if he knows everything about the Kaiju, and suddenly, something grew on the Kaiju's back. 2 more arms emerged from the Kaiju's shoulders, and it stated that it was sure Reno didn't know about them. Reno was shocked, and just as the Kaiju was about to attack, Iharu suddenly arrived and managed to save Reno from the monster's assault. Iharu's body seemed to react with surprise, and Reno did not expect him to return. They tumbled because of Iharu, and when the Kaiju looked at them, it turned out that Iharu had been hit in the body, which made Reno worried and asked why he had done that. As Iharu was panting, he realized that he wasn't really irritated with Reno, but rather he was frustrated with the man who hadn't become better since then. He was irritated with the man who always needed saving. Suddenly, he pointed out to Reno that Reno wasn't going to save him, but rather, he was going to save Reno. Iharu was losing strength, and the monster commented that it didn't understand what was happening. Reno asked why Aharu had come back, to which Aharu simply told him to be quiet and explained that he sent up a flash round, leading Reno to comment that that wasn't the issue. The Kaiju then realized their plan and stated that it wouldn't work because whether alive or not, no one could leave there without his permission. Reno was shocked, but Aharu remained courageous and said that if that was the case, they just needed to man up, and they would both take down the monster. But even though he said that, it was clear that his situation was severe, so he could only provide backup and create an opening for Reno to deliver a full-force attack. Reno took a deep breath, followed Aharu's plan, and they immediately acted. Reno charged, while Aharu shot from the side to distract the Kaiju. The Kaiju dodged Aharu's attacks, and suddenly, electricity emerged from the ground, and Reno noticed it was a conductor round. So Aharu mentioned that he wasn't just the only one testing different types of bullets. The Kaiju noticed it was difficult to move, so it decided to finish off Aharu first. When the monster was about to use its finger attack, Aharu watched carefully, thinking he had received many such attacks before, so all he needed was the right timing. The Kaiju attacked, but Aharu managed to dodge it, irritating the monster. Aharu fired his conductor rounds again to immobilize the monster and signaled to Reno that it was time. Reno positioned himself and unleashed his maximum combat power. As he charged his attack, Reno prayed to God, asking for strength only this time when he needed to be stronger than Kikaru and even their captain, Mina. Soon, Reno released his charged attack, which solidly hit the Kaiju. Reno and Aharu closely observed what happened to the Kaiju, and they noticed something moving on the ground. It turns out that unfortunately, the Kaiju used the scattered debris of other Kaiju to block Reno's attack, which surprised both of them. The human-like Kaiju reappeared, and upon seeing Reno's face, it commented that based on that, Reno seemed to be out of ideas. Using its 2 extra hands, it prepared to attack. Aharu tried to warn Reno, but it was too late as multiple attacks hit various parts of Reno's body. While this was happening, Ikaruga called Hashina and informed him that they had lost communication with Reno and Aharu, which shocked him. He explained that they could not track the comlinks or the vitals of the two. Kafka heard this and noticed that the corpses of the Kaiju beside them were moving, which puzzled him. Hikaru called him, and just as he was about to ask a question, Hikaru confirmed that the monster they had faced at the training grounds was there. Because of this, Kafka's concern for Reno and Aharu spiked. We return to the 2, where Aharu is deeply worried about Reno, who has fallen due to the attack he sustained earlier from the Kaiju. Reno felt as if his body was on fire. He knew he needed to bind his wound and stand up again because he was still alive and the fight was not over. He tried to stand, prompting the Kaiju to comment that he was still able to move. As it pointed again, the monster explained how difficult it was to kill a human by disabling their motor functions without killing them. Aharu tried to shoot the Kaiju to stop it, but the Kaiju easily swatted the bullets away, shocking Aharu. The monster had seen that trick before, and it attacked him, hitting him below the shoulder. Aharu also fell, so the monster approached Reno to finish him off. Reno tried to stand, but the Kaiju shot him again, yet it seemed not to be done. Because of this, the Kaiju shot Reno again, while Aharu was almost crying out of frustration because he could do nothing while his friend was being hurt in front of him. It was ugly, and although he hated to admit it, Reno was truly impressive, and he was sure Reno would become a captain one day. Aharu grabbed his assault rifle and shouted that the Kaiju must be out of its mind to let their fight end there. Unfortunately, when he tried to fire it, it turned out to be damaged, prompting the Kaiju to turn towards him. It pointed at him again and said that it was close to finishing with Reno and didn't need Aharu anymore. Aharu just knelt down and prayed to God, or even to the devil, to save Reno, to save his friend. As the Kaiju prepared to end Reno's life, Aharu closed his eyes, unable to watch his friend die. Unexpectedly, Kafka emerged behind the Kaiju in his Kaiju form and declared that the only one who would die there was the monster in front of him. The kaiju was shocked and, upon turning around, received a solid punch to the face from Kafka. The force of the punch was so strong that it sent the kaiju flying, leaving Iharu utterly astonished. The kaiju was confused about what had happened as it saw its own body. It turned out that its head had been severed from its body due to the immense force of the punch it received. Kafka apologized to Reno for taking so long to get there, while Reno felt incredibly weak. He had thought he could prevent it from coming to this, but in the end, Kafka was forced to transform because of him. Iharu was in awe, and as Kafka carried Reno, the kaiju's body regenerated, and it remarked that it was the one they were talking about. That he is kaiju number 8. Iharu was extremely shocked while watching. Kafka apologized to Reno, mentioning that it might take a bit longer, but advised him not to worry, to just relax, and to use the function of their suits to bind his wound. Kafka then laughed, questioning who he was kidding and why he was giving instructions when he himself couldn't even do it. As Kafka set Reno down to the side, Reno called out to him and told him to be careful before heading back into the battle. Reno thought that he knew Kafka was strong, but he had a bad feeling about the kaiju in front of them. The kaiju stood up again, and as it reattached its head, it questioned why Kafka was interfering with the fellow kaiju, remarking that Kafka was stronger than he realized. It chillingly said that it wanted Kafka's corpse and then suddenly shot him in the body with its finger attack. Kafka was shocked, and blood dripped from his mouth. Reno couldn't believe that the kaiju had managed to injure Kafka in his kaiju form. The kaiju realized how difficult it was for Kafka to be killed, so it transformed again and explained that to kill Kafka, it needed to become larger. Suddenly, numerous limbs burst out from the kaiju's back, shocking Iharu, who commented that they were just being toyed with earlier. When Reno tried to get Kafka to leave, Kafka became very angry and said he understood now. That was what the monster had used to shoot at their bodies. Reno turned around as the kaiju attacked with its new form, and as it approached Kafka, it opened its mouth wide. A surge of energy flowed from its spine to its mouth. As the kaiju's attack was about to hit, Kafka screamed, and using an extraordinary attack, he managed to stop the kaiju's assault. Iharu, Reno, and even the kaiju were stunned. Just as the monster was about to ask how Kafka had done that, Kafka quickly approached it and unleashed a barrage of punches. The monster was surprised and quickly tried to block Kafka using the corpses of other kaijus. Iharu wonders about the kaiju's actions, and the kaiju thought this was its chance to recover. However, Kafka easily tore through its defenses with his strength. It panicked and tried to attack again, but Kafka's strength and speed were too much for it to keep up. It tried to maintain distance from Kafka because it was being pushed back. It thought the situation was abnormal, and something strange was happening because the recovery speed of its injuries was slow. Confused, it decided to retreat, but Kafka did not allow it to leave easily. It received a devastating punch to the body, making it realize there was no opening for escape. Kafka prepared to use his power punch again and mentioned that the core of this kaiju was in its torso, warning it to brace itself because he was going to blast it out. The kaiju felt it was in bad shape, and as Kafka struck it, it tried to deflect the blow, but due to the force, its body gradually began to tear. Soon, its body was flung away while slowly disintegrating. It was thrown into houses, and as it lay on the ground, it thought that it had barely managed to hold its body's shape, but now its core was exposed. Kafka approached menacingly, and facing it, told it that it was the end. Suddenly, Kafka heard something to the side, and it turned out that some defense force troops from the Ikaruga platoon, Team Delta, had spotted them and informed them that they had seen a humanoid monster. Let's go back to a point in time, before Kafka reached Reno and Iharu. Hikaru was surprised when Kafka told her that he was going to find Reno and Iharu. She pointed out that they couldn't contact or detect the vitals of the two, questioning how Kafka intended to find them. Kafka recalled past incidents when he could sense kaiju when they were near him, So he began to transform while explaining that if the humanoid kaiju was with the two, he would be able to detect them. Kafka fully transformed into his kaiju form and left the area to Kikaru. She tried to stop him, and Kafka quickly jumped away. Returning to the present, let's go to Kikaru, who was worried because Kafka had transformed in that place. Team Delta called the others and informed them that in the southeast area of District E, they had spotted a humanoid monster, and based on its features, they believed it was monster number 8. Kikaru was startled, and Hashina immediately dispatched a subjugation team there. This made Kikaru even more worried about Kafka. In Kafka's situation, because he was distracted by the arrivals, he didn't notice that the kaiju had moved away from him. The kaiju commented that its camouflage space was broken down, but it was thankful for it as it gave it an opening. Kafka was irritated, and as the kaiju regenerated, it commented that it now knew Kafka's characteristics and would kill him next time. When Kafka tried to chase the kaiju, it suddenly pointed at the troops, forcing Kafka to save them from its attack. He shielded the finger attack with his arms. The troops were puzzled because he had saved them, and before the kaiju left, it remarked that despite being a monster, Kafka behaved like a human, and they would meet again. After that, Kafka decided to run because he had been spotted, and he quickly jumped high to escape. While in the air, he was relieved to see that Reno and Iharu would be safe. Even though the humanoid kaiju had escaped, he had fulfilled his goal. Next, he landed in an alley to transform back into human form without being seen. Thinking there weren't many people or drones around, suddenly Hashina appeared behind him, and at last, he had seen the detailed monster with a jet-black body and a demon-like skull mask. Hashina prepared to attack, and Kafka was surprised to see him there. Hashina informed the others that he was in District F, facing monster number 8, which frightened Reno and Kikaru upon hearing it, while also catching Mina's attention. Hashina then commented that it looks like the monster has been taking good care of his troop members. Kikaru was surprised to realize that when Hashina said he would send a subjugation team, he meant he would go himself. Although Reno wanted to talk to Hashina, convincing him that the creature he was facing wasn't really a monster, he couldn't muster the strength to do so. When Kafka turned around, Hashina suddenly charged at him, attempting to swiftly sever his head. Fortunately, Kafka dodged it, but Hashina then unleashed a barrage of slashes at him. As Kafka retreated, he remembered Hashina's statement about his strength against small to medium-sized monsters compared to Mina, realizing that Hashina wasn't bluffing and was indeed adept at fighting such creatures. Hashina commented on how challenging Kafka was to fight, saying he should have sliced him once or twice by now. Internally, Kafka noted that whenever he saw their vice commander, he always had a smile on his face, but during these moments, he realized that's how he looked when he was killing monsters. Hashina decided to get serious in the fight, requesting Okanaji to remove his limiter, which she complied with. Hashina prepared to engage and subjugate monster number 8. Upon releasing his full force, it reached an astonishing 92%, revealing the hidden power behind this smiling vice commander. Reno, Iharu, and Kikaru heard this, worrying about Kafka while he was preparing to confront the serious Hashina. He suddenly remembered what happened when he punched the kaiju earlier and how it had torn. He thought about what he would do there since he couldn't perform that kind of attack on Hashina. While thinking, he was suddenly sliced by an exceptionally fast movement, which surprised him. He stared at that spot as Hashina moved quickly and managed to slice his body. Hashina tensed all the muscles in his legs, and as he charged rapidly at Kafka, Kafka realized he couldn't do anything because Hashina was not an opponent he could match if he held back. It was explained there that the Defense Forces suit was an organic weapon made from the muscle fibers and cells of monsters, and the higher the released force, the more you could tune into the suit to unleash its power. Kafka was shocked there and thought to himself that initially, Kikaru's speed seemed ridiculous when he saw it, but Hashina was on a completely different level. Hashina was so fast that he seemed to create after images, making Kafka think that this was not the movement of a human being. He couldn't keep up with Hashina's rapid attacks, and if he just considered Hashina's movement compared to the kaiju he fought earlier, Hashina was much faster. Hashina suddenly used his blade-cutting technique first form, empty strike, and Kafka's left chest and hand were slashed, surprising him. He was surprised because he dodged the attack, but it still hit, making him think it was an invisible slash attack. Hashina then saw his core. Kafka quickly regenerated the cut, and commented to himself that he could do this because he was no longer truly human. He also realized that reconstruction used a lot of energy, so it would be harmful to him if he continued to get hit by Hashina's attacks. Hashina charged at him again, and they exchanged fast attacks, with Kafka managing to punch Hashina's katanas. It was an all-or-nothing situation for him, so he had to take the risk. Hashina, however, couldn't believe that Kafka was still keeping up with him even though he was giving it his all. He was reportedly able to accurately dodge his attacks, making them go off track. So, he was sure that he was facing something above Fortitude 8.0, a specimen that could be categorized as a mega monster. He also wondered there, thinking about the discomfort he sensed while fighting. He brushed off the discomfort he felt and decided to shift himself into top gear all at once. Hashina took position and used his blade-cutting technique fifth form, Misstrike, which powerfully made a cross slash towards Kafka. Kafka was surprised there and tried to dodge it, but it still reached his foot. Hashina immediately followed up, shocking Kafka, who realized that the previous attack was just a disguise, and it was actually a three-part attack. Hashina managed to make a strong slash on his side, but when Hashina thought he had successfully slashed him, suddenly pincers emerged from the cut and clamped onto his katana. Because of this, he couldn't pull the blade out of Kafka's body, and Kafka thought it was dangerous to be hit by it, and it was stronger than he had expected. However, since Hashina had seen his core, he knew that Hashina would target him there. He prepared to punch, and just as he was about to strike, Hashina just cursed there. When Kafka's punch was about to hit, it seemed to strike Hashina's katana because it got cut. Hashina was pushed back by that, and as he was retreating, Kafka quickly escaped. The force of Kafka's punch on his katana made his hand tremble there. Kafka managed to escape from him, so he just facepalmed there. After that, he reported to Mina what had happened, and said that monster number 8 had escaped from him. Let's go over to Kikaru, who was listening while sitting on the carcass of the kaiju, and they were informed that the severed limb of monster number 8 was lost, so they failed to collect a sample, and an investigation team had already been formed. Kikaru thought back and mentioned that seeing Kafka transform right in front of her made her question whether it was really okay for her to continue trusting him. Then she heard something behind her, which made her turn around. It turned out to be Kafka, who had returned to the area. Kikaru's face lit up with joy upon seeing Kafka. Kafka smiled and apologized for making Kikaru worry, causing her to blush and deny that she was worried, though it was evident on her face, and told Kafka to forget about that incident as she had much more to say. While she was acting tsundere, Kafka suddenly collapsed from exhaustion, prompting Kikaru to quickly catch him. As she approached, Kafka apologized for allowing the monster that had hurt Kikaru to escape, which made Kikaru blush again, and she simply said it was okay since she wanted to kill it with her own hands. When Kafka tried to walk, Kikaru got angry and asked where he was going since his body was badly beaten, and Kafka explained that he needed to go to a Haruko and Reno because they were seriously hurt. Kikaru pulled him back, pointing out that there was nothing he could do if he went to them, and assured him that they would be okay because the defense force had already started applying monster recovery powers even to medical technology, and she wouldn't be wrong about that, having experienced it firsthand. Kafka believed her, which made him reflect on how a 32-year-old man like him could be persuaded by a teenager. After that, Kikaru pointed out that instead of worrying about that, Kafka should be more concerned about himself, not only because he was seen by the troop members, but also because he had encountered their vice commander, so it wouldn't be strange if Hashina noticed something, which worried Kafka. In the next scene, we go to Hashina, who seemed to be resting. Mina arrived and commented that it was rare to see him so down. Mina asked if the monster he faced was strong, to which Hashina was surprised and mentioned that she saw him in a rather embarrassing moment. So Mina even took a picture of him for a memento. Joking aside, Hashina explained that there was a good chance that Kaiju number 8 was a mega monster, which caught Mina's attention. If that was the case, it would be the first since the incident in Fukuoka 5 years ago, but fortunately, there have been no reported casualties caused by monster number 8 in the past few months, and it seemed not to be the type that attacks people randomly. Hashina realized the reason for his sense of discomfort. He wondered why the monster punched his katana instead of him. He also noted that the monster's movements and reactions didn't seem typical of a monster, but rather resembled those of a human fighting. Mina walked away and told him she would handle things and that Hashina should rest. She added that whatever type the monster was, they needed to subjugate it. In his mind, Hashina agreed and expressed respect for his commander. Suddenly, he was called by Ikaruga, startled by the loudness of the voice, asking what the problem was. It was explained that the humanoid that attacked Aharu and Reno was believed to be the same one that appeared at the examination venue. But when they saw the monster, it initially looked human, which surprised both Hashina and Mina. Hashina couldn't believe the trait he heard about the monster. In the next scene, we go to Monster Sweeper Incorporated, where a report was made regarding the monster that appeared in Sagamihara City early yesterday morning. They had obtained information that a humanoid monster appeared there, and the investigation was still ongoing. Toku was shocked because Hashina had gone there, accompanied by Okanaji. Okanaji explained that they wanted to provide information about their missing worker. They asked if there were any pictures of the worker or anything else, as it could help in the search if there were other shots from different angles. Toku was concerned and asked if their co-worker was okay and if they could know what they knew, leading Okanaji to look at Hashina, who explained that they could not disclose information about an ongoing case. Hashina bowed to show respect and requested Toku's cooperation in the case. In the following scene, Hashina and Okanaji left, and Okanaji questioned whether Hashina believed it was right not to announce the possible existence of a monster capable of transforming into a human. Hashina explained that it was a decision by the East Japan headquarters, so their higher-ups couldn't object, and he understood why. He said that while it pretended to be a person, there hadn't been an increase in deaths or disappearances compared to previous years, so in short, it wasn't taking any drastic actions. Perhaps that was why they thought announcing and provoking it would be more dangerous. Not only that, but once people started to doubt who the monster was, they would begin to jump to conclusions, which could cause public panic, and innocent people who resembled it might be killed, which could also lead to bullying and riots. So what they could do as soldiers was to find that monster as soon as possible. While reviewing the files on the humanoid, Hashina thought it was unusual because it existed as a proper person in the census. In the next scene, we go to the humanoid Kaiju, and it was clearly weakening as it walked along the road. It was being scolded by an angry driver there, who soon stopped and yelled at it for being in the middle of the road. When it ignored him, the driver became even more irritated, so it turned around and pointed at him. However, it changed its mind because it realized that it wasn't a good idea to make itself stand out more on the radar. But then it changed its mind again when it saw its face in the car mirror and decided that it needed to change its appearance. When the man looked at it annoyed, wondering why it was staring at his car, the humanoid Kaiju transformed and immediately grabbed the man. It ate the man while he was powerless to stop it. After that, it got into the car and heard the news that in response to the current monster incident, the Defense Force had classified the humanoid monster that appeared at the examination venue and in Sagamihara as a long-term subjugation target, giving it the code name Monster Number 9. The Kaiju saw that the man it ate lived alone, which was convenient, and it successfully transformed into the appearance of that man. After that, it thought about how it would kill Kafka, and suddenly its head reverted back to its Kaiju form. Because of this, it regained its composure and thought that it needed to hide again until it could adapt to that body. While the news about Monster Number 9 was being reported, Reno woke up, already lying in the Defense Force hospital. When he turned to the side, he was surprised to see Kafka and Kikaru there. Kafka smiled because Reno had awakened, and Reno commented that he was glad Kafka was okay. Kafka looked at him, but soon after, he playfully hit Reno on the head, saying that he should be the one saying that. Reno touched his face where he had been hit, and suddenly thanked Kafka for saving him and Iharu. Kafka and Kikaru were surprised by Reno's expression as he said this, and then someone else chimed in. It turned out Iharu was also there, and asked why Reno was thanking Kafka. This surprised Reno because he hadn't noticed Iharu was there too. Iharu questioned that wasn't it monster number 8 who had helped them, which made Kikaru nervous, and she explained that Kafka knew about the proliferative organs of the after beasts, which had been a great help, to which Iharu agreed. Iharu then thanked Kafka, whereupon Kafka nervously expressed his gratitude. Iharu added, however, that he was still wondering why that monster had helped them, which made Kafka even more anxious. Iharu mentioned how incredibly strong that monster was, saying that when it arrived, it had blown the head off monster number 9, and despite being a monster, it was very cool. While saying it would have been nice if Kikaru had seen it, Kafka was shown blushing at Iharu's praise of his monster form. This made Iharu question why he was blushing, so Kikaru quickly hit him to bring back his composure, and Kikaru explained that it was just Kafka's natural look. Iharu believed this, allowing Reno to breathe a sigh of relief, glad that Iharu was the one they were talking to. While Kafka, Reno, and Iharu were bonding, Kikaru stepped out of the room and spoke to Haruchi on her smartphone, explaining that Reno and Iharu were awake and would be discharged in 2 weeks. Haruchi understood and said that he would then start making preparations. In the next scene, 2 weeks later, Reno and Iharu were surprised by their troop members with a welcome back party. The surprise on their faces was evident. Their co-workers cheered for their return from the hospital. They were welcomed, and just as Reno was about to speak, Haruchi explained that the party was to celebrate the completion of their first mission, and they had wanted to wait for both him and Iharu to be discharged from the hospital before celebrating. Kafka called the staff, saying they were ready to start, and suddenly the waiters emerged intensely, startling Kafka. They brought out delicious food, explaining that they had a 6th-grade Japanese Wagyu beef, which was the marbled meat course. Reno, Kafka, and Iharu were astonished, questioning if there really was such a high grade of beef. Kafka nervously asked Haruchi what was going on, so Haruchi explained that he had only requested the most basic course. The chef explained that that is a party that Haruchi organized, so they couldn't serve food that would spoil his mood. The chef then pointed out that he was okay with their usual price, whereupon Haruchi said he couldn't afford it, and Hashina was pleased, commenting on their good fortune. Kafka then asked Kikaru who Haruchi really was, leading Kikaru to question why he had let Haruchi organize without knowing his background. Kikaru explained that Haruchi was the son of Izumo Tech, the largest company in their country that manufactures anti-monster weapons. Kafka was shocked, asking if they were the ones who made the Defense Force suits, to which Kikaru agreed and mentioned that his family had financial power beyond what her family could compare. After that, Hashina started a toast, praising his troop members for the good job they did on their first mission, and told them it was rare to have off-duty time with all their contemporaries, so they should enjoy their fellowship. And so, their dining, bonding, and storytelling began. They were delighted as they celebrated their first mission win. Reno moved next to Hashina, commenting that it was the first time he saw everyone so happy. Just as Reno was about to thank Hashina for setting it up, Hashina called him naive and grinned, explaining that the real show was just beginning. This puzzled Reno, and suddenly Kikaru shouted, complaining that Iharu was too arrogant even in training, often letting his personal feelings show. Iharu got angry at her and retorted that coming from Kikaru, he didn't want to hear about boasting from another boastful person. Kikaru argued that it was a different story if you have superior skills like hers. Reno tried to stop the argument, and Aoi real-talked to Haruchi, telling him he clung too much to his own style and tended to neglect the fundamentals, to which Haruchi told Aoi that he was too devoted to the basics, causing him to lag during combinations, and if only he knew, Haruchi was slowing his pace just to let Aoi to keep up with him. Reno didn't know what to do as the two had started arguing. Suddenly, Kafka approached Haruchi and Aoi, shouting who cared about what they were saying, and claiming that the suits made by Haruchi's company were too weak, which is why he hadn't defeated a single monster. Aoi then side-commented that Kafka should say that only after he had released a higher power. Reno was completely overwhelmed while Hashina grinned from the side, seeing what he had mentioned earlier. Others also started arguing. There was an issue about the operation of communications during the mission, with frequent transmission losses, questioning what the problem was, where the transmission team countered that it was their fault for entering a closed-in space without notification. Reno didn't know what to do, but soon he noticed something, and Hashina also noticed him. In a blink of an eye, they were all discussing their mission. Reno noticed that after experiencing their first mission, his teammates had identified their shortcomings. He realized that he wasn't the only one who wanted to get stronger. Everyone else wanted the same. Kafka again got annoyed with Aoi and asked for respect since he was older, to which Aoi replied he only respected those stronger than him, prompting Kafka to challenge him to an arm wrestling match. Others nearby also started heating up, leaving Reno speechless again. Soon, everyone's tempers flared, and they started fighting, with Reno trying to stop them. Reno's face was indescribable, while Hashina laughed at the situation, and Okanaji commented that this happened every year. After that, Hashina decided to calm everyone down and got their attention. He stood up and said it seemed like the time, and he had an announcement to make. Everyone looked at him, and Kafka was puzzled. Hashina called Kafka and said that his discovery during the mission, which had greatly reduced damage, was highly commendable. Hashina then announced that Kafka was promoted to an official troop member. Reno was astonished, and Hashina explained that the offer had arrived that day, and even though the official announcement was to come later, he was welcoming Kafka to the 3rd unit of the Defense Force that day. Kafka couldn't believe what he heard, and he exchanged looks with Reno, and soon, Kafka shouted for joy at the good news, cheered on by his colleagues. In the next scene, we move to the mini-ceremony held by the Defense Force for Kafka, where Mina appointed him as an official troop member of the Defense Force effective today. They saluted each other, and Kafka promised to give his all in battle. After that, Kafka nervously apologized as he was about to leave. As he was exiting the door, Mina commented not to get carried away because he was still far from being ready to fight alongside her. Kafka was surprised and pleased because Mina remembered their conversation, so he also told her to just watch him. Mina looked at him and smiled. She immediately gave him a punishment for calling her informally, making him do 50 push-ups before leaving. When Kafka heard Mina mention Monster Number 8, he paused. But he calmed down when he heard her say that due to the cases of Monster Number 8 and 9, she needed to go to the main office and would likely be there for a while. She left matters to Hashina, so they should report to him for further instructions, to which Kafka saluted and said he understood. Mina added that it was Hashina who recommended Kafka for official membership, which pleased Kafka. Of course, she noted, this was also possible because of Kafka's efforts in the last battle, and she told him to make sure he met Hashina's expectations, to which Kafka agreed. That evening, while studying, Kafka grew sleepy and decided to go to sleep because otherwise, he might get scolded by Hashina again. When he left his room, he saw that the training room lights were still on. Annoyed, he went there to scold whoever had left the lights on, but he was surprised when he saw who it was. He found Hashina still practicing, which made him wonder what he was doing. Hashina started moving quickly, as if he was fighting someone in front of him, though no one was there, and Kafka realized he was doing mental imagery training. Watching his moves, Kafka noticed something. It wasn't just ordinary mental imagery training, but a reenactment training of his fight as Monster Number 8. He was shocked when he noticed the moves, even making him sat down because of it. Hashina noticed him and asked if he was studying again so late at night. Kafka nervously laughed and redirected his focus back to Hashina, asking what he was doing up so late. Hashina explained that he was devising countermeasures against Monster Number 8, so that if they were to face each other again, he would be able to slice every part of it with a single blow. Kafka was chilled by Hashina's menacing explanation. Hashina added that since their battle began, he had made a mistake in his first move. He had tried to investigate the abilities of that kaiju, and if he had used his full power then, he was sure he would have sliced its neck. Hashina pointed his katana at Kafka and said that afterward, if he had used the sixth form instead of the fifth, he would have managed to slice through its core. Deep inside, Kafka was terrified by what was being said, so Hashina commented that he seemed too scared, reminding him that it was only a practice sword. Hashina mentioned that number 8 was too strong for a regular troop member, so he was certain that monster number 9 would be the same. Therefore, he said it was necessary that he be the one to confront and kill them. Kafka stared and thought that their vice commander was truly admirable, not only trying to protect civilians, but also trying to protect their troop members. Kafka called Hashina and explained that he had heard from Mina about her high expectations for him, so he saluted and said he would do everything he could to become a valuable asset, which made Hashina smile. Suddenly, Hashina put Kafka in a headlock and said he had no expectations for someone with just 1% power to become any valuable asset, so he shouldn't get carried away. After that, Kafka said his goodbyes and left, but Hashina added that nevertheless, he would hold a 1% expectation for him. This encouraged Kafka, and Hashina said he was going back to the office and that Kafka should go to sleep. Kafka followed suit, and in the next scene, while that was happening, we moved to the skies above the Tachikawa base, 8,000 meters above ground, where we see another humanoid kaiju leading several flying-type kaijus, and it commanded them to descend.